Good afternoon and welcome back. We ended our last session with a topic of on inventory management. We gave you certain definitions, what inventory is all about, what are the types of inventories, what are the categories of inventories, who needs inventory, what are the benefits of inventory, why is inventory required. We also briefly discussed the costs that are associated with inventory management. As always, we are going to do a bit of a recap because I did tell you in our last session that inventory management, forecasting, warehouse management, transportation management are a few of the extremely important areas of supply chain management, and performances of these particular functions ultimately determines the success and failure of a supply chain where an organization is involved. Let us go to our presentation and see what exactly we mean by inventory, what are the definitions, and we will also quickly do a recap of whatever areas we have already covered in the last session. So, let us go to the presentation. The presentation tells us what inventory management is all about. Just refer to a few words: raw materials. From raw materials we produce goods which are work in process, components, semi-finished goods. Then we use the components and the semi-finished goods to produce the final product, and these are a company's assets, and the final product will be ready to sell. Inventory represents one of the most important assets of a business because the turnover of the inventory represents one of the primary sources of revenue generation. Now, while inventory is important for the final product, because from the inventory the demand in the market is satisfied or met, but we also have to understand, as we had discussed in the last session, that there are many components in the supply chain who are involved in the finished goods. So, somebody who is producing the raw materials, then the semi-finished goods or the components, and the final product. So, this goes as far as the production of the manufacturing is concerned. So, these three players are involved directly in manufacturing of the ultimate product or ultimate good. After that, what happens is distribution. Once the product is ready, it has to be distributed and sent to the customers for consumption. So, and you all know, we have discussed so far, it goes to the distributor and the retailer. Now, all of them, all these members, all these units are involved with inventory management at their level. The person who is supplying the raw material to the company who is producing the components or the semi-finished goods, he has to maintain its inventory. This company has to maintain his own inventory. So does the production house or the manufacturing unit, and so is the distributor and the retailer. They need inventory for their own benefits, for their own reasons, and the volumes and the type of inventory they maintain is totally different from each other. Let us go to the presentation and see the other areas of inventory management. In the last slide, we discussed about inventory, what inventory is. Now, what is inventory management? To manage this inventory, this stock of goods, the stock of raw materials, the stock of the components, the stock of the finished goods, to manage it efficiently, to maintain a certain flow, to ensure that the company does not go out of stock, to ensure that the inventory is maintained at the lowest possible cost possible. So, that entire management of inventory is inventory management. If you see the slide and see the definition, supervision of the assets, stock items, So, the flow of the goods from the manufacturer to warehouses from these facilities. So, from the entire facility, the efficient management of the goods, right from the stage of raw materials to the finished product, then to the distribution to the distributor, retailer and the customer. The efficient maintaining an efficient flow of goods or the stock or retention of the stock at the various facility is managing the inventory, managing the stock, which is extremely critical, which is extremely essential to any company who is handling these goods at any point of time. Let us see the next slides. We will skip a few slides so that we only discuss the ones which are relevant to us. So, in the next slide, we state the primary, the major functions of inventory. For marketing and production, support marketing and production. It is a working stock, a stock which is regularly required for day-to-day operations. Anticipation stock, that you anticipate that there could be a requirement suddenly because of high market demand. Psychic stock, sometimes the retailers, they display a certain items at their counters to attract the customer. There may not be any immediate demand for them, but to create a demand just by display, they would keep a stock which is called psychic stock, so that once I see this item which probably has been designed and packaged well, or it is a new product with some benefits, so they would like to attract my attention as a customer. I will get attracted at the retailers, and that may influence me to buy that material, buy that item, buy that particular product, primarily the consumer goods. So, that is called a psychic stock. This stock that is maintained by the retailer is called psychic stock. Let us see the other functions. Decoupling stock in the event of a slowdown or stoppages in production. Now, it is very, very essential that a company, the one particular role of inventory is to constantly supply. Now, the primary responsibility of this particular entity is to ensure that he constantly supplies to the manufacturing unit, so that the manufacturing process does not come to a halt. The manufacturing process continues. Similarly, the role of the raw material supplier is to ensure that he constantly feed the next entity, which is the work in process, who is producing the work in process goods or the components, because if there is a stoppages in his production, that is going to directly affect him. Not only is going to directly affect him, if it directly affects him, mind you, these are chains, these are all connected to each other. So, any disturbance at any loop at any point is going to disturb the entire supply chain process. So, everybody has to maintain a stock which can be used as a safety stock or as an emergency stock in case there is a stoppage or there is a temporary disturbance in the production. Let us see the slide about the other functions. Every company wants to get the maximum, every company invests and they want to get the return on the investment. So, they want to maintain a proper efficient management of their stock and inventory to ensure that the supply and demand, that is what the business is all about today, and it has been always that the supply meets demand. That is the basic principle of every economics. Of course, today supply is more oriented on demand, that means that demand influences the supply. But at the same time, we have to understand that demand is so volatile today. It can always change on the positive or the negative direction at any point of time. So, inventory management should be efficient enough to be flexible and efficient to adjust to this change in demand. So, the supply has to adjust to the change in demand and vice versa. So, both of them should meet, otherwise the entire productivity of a particular company is going to fall. Let us concentrate again on the slide. Improving efficiency, a safety stock, geographical specialization and pipeline inventory. What is geographical specialization? There are inventories, there are products. For instance, you need to have a constant supply of say room heaters at places which are extremely cold. So, geography specific, location specific products and management of inventory is required, and that applies to different range of, it is not only a question of heater, it could be a food item, it could be apparels. For instance, in colder in countries which is very cold or regions which are extremely cold, the woolens, or vice versa in other places, it is the geographical nature of, or it is the type of products that are produced, keeping in mind the climate and the environment and where the location is situated in a particular country or in the world. So, a particular product needs to be, there should be sufficient stock or sufficient inventory of that product, because that particular product is required in that particular geographical location throughout the year. So, inventory management also differs from location to location depending upon its geography or depending upon its location in a particular country or the world. The pipeline inventory also are the ones which are ready for dispatch. So, there are different mechanisms which are required to maintain a pipeline inventory, and we have discussed that to an extent in warehouse management. That means, pipeline inventory are the ones which are in the process of being dispatched to the market or to the customer. So, their accessibility and their management has to be unique compared to the other inventory. There are inventories which are required, which may not be required immediately. They may be for a long term requirement. So, it differs from items which are immediately required or may not be required for a while in the coming few months. So, these goes as for the functions of inventory is concerned. We are now going to discuss the roles of inventory, improve the matching. So, roles and the functions go hand in hand, as you can see over here. The material flow time, reduce waiting time, buffer inventory, reduce buffer inventory, economies of scale, supply demand variability, seasonal variability, cycle inventory, safety inventory, seasonal variability. So, all these factors are considered. For instance, safety inventory, safety stock, the material flow time between all the units. So, an efficient inventory management would ensure that there is not much of waiting time. No company would like to have a huge stock of inventory, because there are costs involved in maintaining inventory in a particular facility or a company. So, for instance, a retailer, he would never like to have a large inventory, because for him it is all about movement of the material through its retail store. So, similarly, the waiting time, as I said, the waiting time at a particular facility, the inventory should not stay at a particular location for a long time. There should be efficient movement of the inventory or the product among the facilities. Who needs the inventory, who needs the product. So, this goes as for the role of inventory in supply chain is concerned. Now, we are going to see we have discussed the type of materials, type of inventories, manufacturing, the finished products, the raw materials, the work in progress, the finished goods, the packing materials, MRO items, replacement parts, pipeline. Now, there are few items which are not directly involved with the production, with the finished good. For instance, every plant, every manufacturing unit, they require certain items which are directly involved in production, not indirectly involved in production. They have no role in the finished product. Suppose anything that is required to maintain the machineries, everything that is required to maintain the machineries, maybe packing materials, maybe the lubricant oils. There are so many things. It differs from company to company. It differs from company who produce a certain type of product, industrial goods, or somebody is producing pharmaceutical goods, somebody is producing consumer goods. So their units, their manufacturing units require different types of items. There are plants who constantly require packing material, for instance. So packing materials do not add to the final product, but definitely you need to have an inventory, a proper management of inventory of packing materials. Same with items which are required to ensure that the plant, the machineries and the tools, they are maintained properly. So those items also fall under the category of inventory management. Replacement part, pipeline. So replacement part is not difficult to understand, that at the time of production, at the time of assembling goods, there could be a particular component, a part. Particularly we have seen, and it has been observed, that automobile industry and other industries as well, they need a part to be quickly replaced. So there has to be a very proactive inventory management of the replacement parts, because the final good cannot wait for that particular part, which has to be immediately and promptly supplied, so that the final product good is quickly produced. So there is no waiting time. So this is the next slide also tells us about the types of inventory, which we have already discussed. Last time we also discussed about the categories, the who needs inventory actually. What is the category in inventory? Inventory is required at the raw material stage, inventory is required at the component stage, inventory is required at the manufacturing unit, inventory is required. So at every level, the volume or the amount of stock required, amount of inventory required differs. For instance, we have mentioned that a distributor would require a larger volume of inventory than the retailer, because a distributor is responsible of delivering to various retailers, and he should have sufficient stock to ensure that all retailers are properly taken care of, or all retailers demands are promptly delivered without any waiting period, without having the lead time, a large lead time. Whereas the retailer, a retailer does not, he is never inclined to have a large inventory. For him, the movement of the good through its retail centers has to be very fast. So he needs a limited stock or limited inventory. So inventory is required everywhere. It is only the volume of inventory that differs from company to company or the various units in the supply chain management. We have also discussed last time that the inclination of inventory, there are different functional groups in a company, a marketing or a finance or a design or engineering group or the purchase department. Now they have their own individual objectives, they have their own targets and goals. For instance, the marketing department target is to ensure that the maximum revenue is generated, and for that they cannot wait a customer, they cannot make a customer wait for getting his shipment delivered. So they want the demand to be met or the delivery to be met immediately. So they would always require a high volume of inventory. They do not want a customer to wait, because that will have a negative effect. The customer may shift over to other company. So what may come, it is the inclination of the marketing department to have a high volume of inventory. In contrast, the finance department will have a low inventory, because there is a cost related to inventory management, ordering or the holding cost particularly. Similarly, the designer or the engineering department would require a low inventory. We did discuss this in the last session. Why do they require, why would an engineering or architecture or company who's designing a particular product would require a low inventory? Because in the modern times, you would have seen with every product, the lifespan is very important. The lifespan of any product is getting smaller and smaller, because every now and then the feature of the product is changing. You can see that everywhere, whether it's a smartphone, whether it's a music system, whether it's a washing machine, whether it's apparels, any item that you see around us, even a simple mineral water bottle. The type, the feature, the size, the volume of mineral waters or the soft drinks being sold is changing every now and then. So, an engineering department cannot afford to have a large stock of inventory, because that inventory can immediately become obsolete, because the market would require another product with a different feature, with an improved feature. Same with the automobiles as well. You can see the feature and the type of the benefits that automobile companies are giving, because there is huge competition. Everybody wants to improve its features and benefits. So, these functional groups, they have their own view towards inventory, whether it's large, whether it's small, whatever. Now, what determines the inventory level of a company is the production rate. Better the production rate, higher the inventory. The lead time between the order and the delivery of the product. The inventory investment, the approach of a company towards its inventory, whether it requires a high inventory or it requires a just in time inventory. How many days an inventory? So, I would try to play safe, and I would assume a situation, a frequent situation which may call for a disturbance in production. You remember we discussed the decoupling inventory. So, such companies would like to have very large volume of inventory, because they wouldn't like the supply to the market getting disturbed. They do not want any problem for the customer. They are a customer oriented company. So, to be on the safe side, they would like to have a high volume of inventory, which will ensure a constant supply to the customer. So, the customer is not waiting at all. So, this is another matrix. So, there are different matrices, there are different parameters which judge, which determine the volume of inventory in a particular company. We have discussed 3 inventory costs in the last session. The material cost. The material cost actually is not a part of the inventory management. The material cost is always fixed, whereas the carrying cost and the whole ordering cost. Carrying cost is sometimes called holding cost as well. Ordering cost we discussed, we are not going to get extended on this. Ordering costs are the costs involved right from placing the order to the till such time the order is delivered to the warehouse or the facility. So, every action involved in ordering, including the transportation, loading, unloading, etc., are a part of the ordering cost. What are the holding costs? So, once a shipment has arrived at my warehouse, until such time that the shipment moves out to the market or to the next channel, I have to hold this inventory. So, there are different costs involved: maintenance, rent, warehouse maintenance, infrastructure, insurance, and we did discuss these costs earlier. And as you can see in our next slide, what are the various inventory costs, carrying costs that are involved, handling cost within, because there is a constant handling of inventory within the warehouse, shifting, picking, placing, the taxes. So, these are the various costs related to holding an inventory or carrying that inventory. We call it, sometimes it is called carrying that inventory through the warehouse. So, the time, all the costs that is incurred till such time that inventory is held in the warehouse, whereas ordering cost is the cost involved from ordering to the delivery. So, primarily these two are variable costs. Why variable? Because they all depend upon the volume ordered, the lot order and the number of inventory stock units that are kept in the warehouse. So, they have direct connections. So, this cost varies from time to time depending upon the how much is ordered, what is the lot size ordered, how much transportation, because transportation again depends upon the volume of the goods transported. The transportation also includes the number of orders, Some few companies order in big sizes and they have limited transportation, whereas companies, they order quite frequently in a year or in a month, so they have frequent transportation charges. So, when you have frequent transportation, frequent orders, the inventory level will be less, because at every order the order size is small. When you order in big size, your number of transportation is less, but you have to understand it will occupy a larger space in your warehouse, and to maintain and to hold that inventory will be much higher than if it is ordered in smaller lots. So, this is the difference, and we are going to discuss more as far as the inventory costs are concerned. Last time we did discuss about one very interesting aspect. We are going to very quickly once again recap, and that is average inventory. Any company who's producing, who has ordered, this is time and this is quantity. So, particular company has ordered Q. We have already discussed this in the last session. So, I will quickly recap on this. So, a company has ordered Q amount of shipment or goods at a particular point of time, and there is constant consumption. So, its inventory level gradually goes down. It starts with a maximum inventory of Q, and at a certain point of time the inventory level comes to 0. Now, we also discussed that he needs to reorder his goods, because no company can afford to go stock out. So, there has to be a reorder. It happens in our daily life as well, at our home as well, and as we had said earlier also, that supply chain management has some very close connection the way the kitchens in our respective homes operate, in terms of procurement, in some from management, inventory, stocking, whatever. So, if you see, the company will decide that at a certain point the material has to be ordered again, because at this point it will go 0. It orders at reordering point RO. So, he orders here, the supplier takes this much of time to deliver, which is called lead time. By the time the consumption keeps happening, and at this point of time he gets his order of Q again, so that its inventory level again rises to Q, and this continues. Again there are consumption, again there is a reorder over here, again there is a lead time over here. So, reorder number 2, this is lead time. So, order is delivered at this point of time, he again reaches his maximum inventory level of Q. Now, the question is, none of the company's units, everybody who is involved in inventory management can't afford to have an hourly, daily, weekly management of inventory. So, one has to understand what is the average inventory, and that is exactly what we are going to discuss over here. What is the average inventory that my facility is carrying every month or every year, depending upon the unit of time that he wants to. So, let's, for example, if he wants to understand the average inventory, so very simple mathematics, he would just take his maximum inventory Q plus his minimum inventory 0, which is 2. So, average inventory with any company is denoted as Q by 2. That is the average inventory maintained by a company. So, he would calculate his average inventory, and based on the average inventory he will arrive at its reordering point. So, if somebody orders, for instance, 100 pairs of 100 pairs of, we said earlier, pairs of jeans, for instance, 100 pairs of trousers. So, and every day there are 10 pairs of trousers which are getting consumed. So, in the 10th day, on the 10th day, he is going to go stock out, right. So, based on that, he has to arrive at his average inventory, which is 100 plus 0 by 2, which is equal to 50, right. So, here this is his average inventory, and he is going to decide that this would be my reorder point. At this point, whenever my inventory comes to 50, I need to reorder, so that I keep maintaining my average inventory of 50, or I get my maximum supply of Q, or 100 pairs of jeans at the end of every 10 days, because we have hypothetically taken this figure of 100 pairs of jeans and the consumption of jeans, pairs of jeans being 10 per day. So, on the 10th day this comes to an end. Now, inventory cost in every company goes through a phase, goes through certain phases. What are these phases? What does a company do to start with? A production, a company who is involved with production or manufacturing. So, he starts with getting raw materials, that is the first phase, first stage. The next stage is what we can call work in progress, fabrication, the third stage is sub-assembly, and fourth, when you produce the final good, it is assembly. What is interesting here is these are the different stages. So, in between every stage there is inventory management, there is inventory required, there is an inventory management required, and once assembly is done, again inventory is required. So, at every stage when raw material comes, you need to have an inventory of raw material, so that there is a constant supply to the work in process or the fabrication process. They also need to maintain an inventory, so that the sub assembly section can be constantly supplied with. Similarly, they need to constantly deliver or supply to the assembly section. So, at every stage they need to maintain a certain stock. At every stage a certain stock is required. This is the final inventory, the final stock that is required, because after assembly we have actually produced the final good. So, these are the phases. After the break, we are going to discuss the costs involved at the various phases. As we said, raw material, once raw material comes, there is a cost of raw material, then it goes to the inventory, work in process. So, we will see how cost is related to the time. right. So, this is an important factor, and we have already shown you. Just look at the slide over here. We are going to show the diagrammatic view of the different cost in different phases. One of the slides we skipped was the total cost curve, which is a combination of carrying cost, holding cost, procurement, and out of stock cost. So, we have the total cost diagram over here. Of course, we did not mention the concept of the shortage or the stock out cost, because whenever a company goes stock out, we said that the inventory management involves inventory management costs, holding, ordering, the material, and the stock out. Stock out means when a company has shortage of stock, when he goes out of stock, when he does not have any stock. How is that a cost? That is not a direct cost, that is an indirect cost. Because when you have a stock out, and if there is a demand, you won't be able to supply the demand, and in case you do not have a back ordering case, and we are going to discuss back ordering later on. If the customer is not willing to wait and moves to some other customer, or he cancels the order, you lose the revenue, the company loses the revenue or the business. So, that is an indirect cost that a company suffers. So, that is also a part of the cost. But primarily we are going to restrict our discussion to holding and ordering cost. So, this is the cost to time curve, and here we are going to discuss the costs and the inventory involved at the various phases. So, the first phase is the raw material. This is the, suppose this is O and this is M. So, this is the cost of the raw material. So, when the raw material comes, then you have the activity then you have is fabrication. We will end this session with these different phases: raw material, fabrication. In fact, and then you have the inventory of the fabricated product, then you have sub-assembly, inventory, again assembly, and final inventory. After the break, we will come and we will discuss in detail what are the various costs involved over here. So, I will see you on the other side of the break. Thank you.